So when you're getting set up with ozone therapy, you're gonna need an oxygen tank. Again, remember that we're not using a concentrator or room air because of the nitrates that'll be created when you're doing ozone therapy. Instead, we're using 99.9% oxygen. On here, you see two different oxygen tanks, and there's different sizes of tanks, but the difference between these two is the fitting that is on them. So both of these fittings can have different sizes and their corresponding fitting. This one is 540 and this one is 870. This one right here is the one you would get from a commercial oxygen supply. It does not require a prescription, which is why almost everybody buys this tank instead of this one, because they're both rated for 99.9% oxygen, and it's much easier to get this one. So this one is industrial and this one is considered medical. The medical one does require a prescription, so you have to get a prescription from your doctor. It's recommended if you're gonna get a prescription and if you have migraines to put migraines on the prescription, because that's gonna cut through a lot of bureaucracy of getting a medical oxygen tank. But again, there's really no difference between the two. They're literally filling it from the same spigot, so the quality between the two is the exact same. So to find a 540 commercial oxygen tank, all you have to do is Google weld supply shop near me, air gas near me, or Prax Air near me. It's really as easy as going in and buying a coffee. You just have to know what to ask for. So when you go into one of these shops, it can be the weld supply, the Prax Air, the air gas, you just say, hey, I need an oxygen tank, and then they'll probably ask you what size. Usually people get 20 cubic feet or 40 cubic feet. This is the 40 cubic foot oxygen tank. This will last a person typically about 6 months of use, regular use with ozone therapy. So if you're getting into ozone therapy, again, this is the recommended oxygen tank. And now I'm gonna show you how to set it up. So you might have noticed how I said that these have different fittings on them. This is the regulator for the 540 industrial or commercial oxygen tank. And you can tell because it has this nut that spins on it. And it's really quite simple to set this up. All you need to do is put the stem right into the piece here, and then you're gonna bring the nut over, and then you're gonna start to finger tighten it. So once that's finger tight, you're actually gonna take a wrench that looks like this. I think it's called a monkey wrench. I'm not sure actually, I can't remember. But you take your wrench and get it to the right spacing, and then we're just gonna tighten it. So you don't wanna like really wrench on it, literally, but you just want to get it tight enough to where you can get it off easily. So the second thing I'm going to do is this is the valve right here that's actually going to open up the valve inside here. So when I twist this, it opens up this valve. But oxygen will still not be coming out because this regulator is preventing the oxygen from coming out if it's set to 0. So make sure this is set to 0. We'll go ahead and open up this valve right here. So my tank here today is actually empty. But typically what you do is when you turn this valve, this pin on the regulator is going to populate above the red. So if it's in the red, that means the tank is empty or it's very close to needing a refill. So go ahead and open up that valve, and then you would see this pin pop up like I said. Then from there, there's these settings on the regulator. And once I do that, that's when the oxygen starts to come out, because now the valve is open, the regulator is open, and it's controlling the flow rate at which the oxygen is coming out. And this is the 870 medical oxygen tank that does require the prescription. This one's a little bit easier to put the regulator on. The regulator for the 870 medical oxygen tank looks like this. It should have 2 pins and this T pin up here. On here, this is called the post toggle valve. Sometimes you need a wrench because they don't always come with this to open up the valve that's on here. And then of course, this is what is going to regulate the flow. So once we open up the valve here, you can change the flow rate on the regulator. So to put the 870 regulator onto the 870 medical oxygen tank, you just affix it over the stem of the tank. And I'll turn it this way so that you can see the gauge. And then I'm just going to tighten with this T-pin, and there's this little divot in there that'll go right in. So you'll know if you do it right because the pins go into 2 holes right here, and then there's a little divot that this T-pin tightens up against. From there, I can open up the oxygen tank, and you should see this pin that is on the red go above the red if there is oxygen in the tank. All right, so you can see the pin is above the red, which means we do have oxygen in here, and no oxygen is actually going to come out until I start to change the settings or the flow rate on the regulator here. So that's how you set up the 870 medical oxygen tank. So these are how the tanks look if you have both set up. Once you get the setup of the regulator onto the oxygen tank, there's virtually zero difference in the operation of the generator and the oxygen. This knob on here is the same as the knob on here. And the reason this is important is because to change our concentration on the ozone generator, which we'll get to in a second, you have to change this. So depending on the protocol that you're using, you'll see that it says like use setting 7, and you'll turn this to 7 or whatever number it tells you to.